Okay, SEC Week 6. This video is going to be on South Carolina taking on Tennessee at noon in Neyland Stadium in Knoxville, Tennessee. So a couple things that are very interesting about this game. Number one, Tennessee is kind of on a roll on offense. They just got done with a 62-24 rout of Missouri at Faro Field in Columbia, Missouri. And South Carolina has struggled on offense. I mean, there's no other way to put it. If you're a South Carolina fan, the offense has been nothing short of putrid. I mean, you can't run the ball. You return all but one of your offensive line that carried the way for a 1,000-yard rusher last season in Kevin Harris, and yet you can't get anything going with the run game, even with Luke Doty, who is apparently supposed to be more of a mobile quarterback, which he is, there's no doubt, but you definitely thought his legs would show up more in the run game, and I definitely think there's something to be said about Shane Beamer in South Carolina kind of shying away from the quarterback injury situation for Luke Doty early in the season. They said he might be ready for week 1. Maybe they thought that, but there's no way that was true. They had to have Zeb Noland, who no slight to him, but was literally a coach just a few months ago. They had to have him come in and start the season. As bad as South Carolina's offense has been, the bright spot has been their defense, which is 6th in the conference and actually 10th overall in the country in terms of takeaways. They're getting a lot of takeaways. They're converting a lot of those takeaways into points. They should have had one more this past Saturday, but Jaheim Bell, the carrier of the football on that fumble return that would be touchdown, let go of the ball right before the goal line. Come on, like, I can't believe this is still happening. There's been so many come on man moments and so many bruh moments, and this just keeps happening. Just in general, you gotta be more disciplined and in the zone than that. Those kind of mental errors will not get you past a pretty good Tennessee team, especially on the road in Neyland Stadium, where South Carolina has historically struggled to get wins. On the Tennessee side of things, there's an offensive mix-up there, with quarterback Joe Milton being subbed out for quarterback Hendon Hooker based on an injury, but also based on his performance, Hendon Hooker's that is, against Missouri, throwing for 3 touchdowns, coming in and providing a spark, just getting things going and really looking like the attack that head coach Judd Hupel really wants to see at Tennessee. Will there be nerves coming out for your first start at an SEC program? Who knows? And that's where South Carolina's defense comes in yet again. That defensive line is loaded, and the secondary is outperforming the way we thought it would play in the preseason. South Carolina was expected to have a pretty poor to average secondary, and maybe that'll still show up over the course of the season, but it's actually been pretty good. Jalen Foster playing out of his mind, leading the country right now in interceptions with 4. He's also getting in there and just forcing a ton of turnovers. This past weekend, I believe he had 2 strips that really helped out South Carolina when they needed it. Jordan Burch and Zach Pickens are some other big-time names to keep an eye on from the Gamecock defense. These two teams playing together are really interesting because if you think about it, they are kind of opposites. The offenses are pretty much polar opposites. The defenses are kind of opposites, but not quite as polarizing as the offense. Tennessee's defense this year hasn't been horrible. They're ranked 52nd out of 130 eligible teams, so definitely not that bad about the middle of the pack, but South Carolina's clearly has the advantage here, and if they can get their pass rush going and get after that Tennessee quarterback this weekend, that's about the only chance they have to win, in my opinion. They have to have their defense force turnovers as they have been, because at this point, I don't believe in South Carolina's capability to pick it up on the offensive side of the ball. You've already had 5 games to tune this offense up and get it to the vision of Marcus Satterfield, the South Carolina offensive coordinator, but you really haven't had any success outside of that first game against Eastern Illinois. East Carolina was a dogfight. Georgia scored 13 points. Granted, you are the only team to score a touchdown offensively against Georgia this year. Kentucky scored 10 points. Against Troy, a very inferior team, you only got 23, and that's the reason why I really am just not feeling good at all about this South Carolina offense. They've got good players. Josh Vann has proved that he can be a leading receiver. Jalen Brooks has done some really nice things. Obviously, you've got the leading rusher returning from last season, Kevin Harris. You've also seen Juju McDowell do some really good things. Obviously, there are some good players on that offense, but for whatever reason, they're just not able to get it together fully. They're not able to click, and that's the concerning part, and I have very little faith that you're going to be able to get this thing together to the level it needs to be. If you couldn't get it done against Troy, and you couldn't really get it done against East Carolina, but granted, East Carolina is starting to turn the corner, so college football is a funny game. I just don't think you're going to be able to get it done this weekend on the road against Tennessee, or any other SEC game for that matter, maybe besides Vandy. But South Carolina's defense will keep them in this game, and I do believe it will come down to the fourth quarter and whether or not overall in that game Marcus Satterfield can get his offense into some sort of rhythm, especially with the run game. That's where it has to start. South Carolina has to run the ball for any chance whatsoever. Otherwise, I'm very pessimistic on the viewpoint for this South Carolina football team. However, that's just to get the win. The line right now is Tennessee minus 10.5. Now, let's not kid ourselves. Tennessee scored 62 points against a pretty subpar Missouri team. Missouri's nothing special, and their defense couldn't stop anything. South Carolina's defense is a much bigger challenge for Tennessee, and I think they'll find that out quickly in this game. Now, their offense is better than South Carolina's offense, so I do expect them to win the game. However, I expect South Carolina to cover this 10.5 point spread, and for Tennessee to win something along the lines of 24-17.